We are now at the point in the service where we're going to hear the message. So I know this person very well.
You better.
Yes. This is my mother, Joleyne Blain. Thank you for agreeing and being willing, and it's an honor to have you speak to us today.
So when Nick was asking me to do this, I was thinking, it was back in September on Jonathan's birthday, which was a month ago. And so when I went home, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? I know, I'll talk about the storms of life, not knowing that my grandson was going to be in the storm of his life this week. So I just thought that was a big God incident. Actually, that's what Violet Ash called them years ago. I said once, do you believe in coincidences? And she said, I call them God incidences. So I've always called them a God incident since then. So I want to tell you a little story. So I can't get to the point without going backwards and starting from like the beginning of the story. Bucky always says, just get to the point, Joe, but I can't. I've got to tell you why I'm going to get to the point. So anyway. So this happened back on November the 29th, 2010. Before I get there, though, the storms of life, I mean, all of us have experienced the storms of life. Some have been small, some have been big. You know, some have knocked us over, we've gotten up, you know, but we've all experienced storms of life, however great or small. But God never promised that we would not have storms in our life, but he promised us in the midst of it all that he would be right there with us, no matter what. So, you know, if you have faith and believe that to be true, he will always be with us. And he's before us and behind us and beside us and in us. And so when we go through these storms in our life, you just have to hold on to the fact that God is going to get us through the storm. So this is a story that I want to tell you all that happened. Like I said, it was on November 29th of 2010. So I'm in the gift industry, so I travel the state of West Virginia. And back then, I had Western PA. So I had left that evening to go to a hotel to be at an account the next morning. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden, I get up to Western PA, and it's just like pouring the rain. It's that rain where a sheet that you can't even see in front of you. And somehow, I don't know how, but somehow I just got off like the main highway, and my GPS wasn't working, and I was like, I don't even know where I was. And I was like in a residential area, you know, and I thought, well, maybe if I turn on the radio and it'll have one of those stations where it gives a report and what roads to take or something. I turned the radio on, and it was a Christian radio station, and the story that they were telling was about when Jesus calmed the storm, when he calmed the storm in the boat on the sea. And so Matthew 8, 23 through 25, Jesus calms the storm. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. And suddenly a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping, and the disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. And he replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? And then he got up, and he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And then in Luke 8, 24 to 25, the disciples went and woke him, saying, Master, Master, we're going to drown. And he got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and the storm subsided, and all was calm. In 25, Luke 8:25, he says, where is your faith, he asked the disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him. And then in Deuteronomy 31:8, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. And do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. And this verse emphasizes that God's presence is not temporary or conditional, and that people have no reason to be afraid or discouraged. That tumbles into the whys, which that's another day and time. We just have to have faith and trust in God. So I was going through this storm. I couldn't see. The water was just raging. And I kept listening to the station. Somehow I made my way back to this route, back to the highway, back to the interstate, and got to the hotel. So when I got to the hotel, the phone rang, and it was my sister. I have 3 sisters. So my sister that was 10 years older than me, we were so close, she was in an emergency room, and they had told her that she had clinically metastasized breast cancer. And she had carried it for like 5 years, and for whatever reason, before she saw help. So, in the meantime, it's storming outside and raining outside. So I said, I'm going to cancel my appointments. I'll be there in the morning. So I left that morning from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, wherever I was, and I drove back to Huntington. And I rushed into the Cabell Huntington, and rushed into her room. Now, my sister had a belief system, and she had a strong faith, but, we never really discussed, her faith or what, how she believed. But I went in that room, and her daughter, my niece, was on this side, and her daughter-in-law was on this side of the bed. And I got up on my soapbox, and I said, after I hugged her and cried and everything else, I said, you know what? You are in the storm of your life. And I said, Christ is right there in the boat with you. And I said, I will be there every step of the way from the very beginning. And, their eyes got real big because, I was like preaching to her, And I said, I won't leave you. I'll be with you, but you've got to make a decision what you're going to do. And I said, you're in a storm, and Christ is going to be in the boat with you. He's going to help you through this. So that was the 30th of November, 2010. So the doctors told her, if you did everything that the protocol, they gave her 2.5 years. And it was 2.5 years. In 2013, she passed away. But I'm telling you, that boat, through that whole ordeal, I always felt this sense of calmness. I was at every chemo treatment, every radiation, everything, every single time, anything she needed. I was right there with her. I was working, and my life was very busy at the time, but somehow God made sure that I was there with her. So that was in 2013. And then 7 years later, I myself was diagnosed with breast cancer. And prayerfully, it wasn't metastasized. But I went through 5 months of chemo, and I went through radiation. I went through 1.5 years of immune therapy. And I'm still on a hormone that ends in 2026. Cancer-free in January. Prayerfully, I hope when I have all my scans, it'll stay like that. But, so I was in the storm of my life. And it was all through 2020. Everything was shut down, My family couldn't go in with me. And, when I had my surgery and everything, it was 2020. Everything was, everybody had to stay back. But I knew that Christ was in my boat. He was in my boat with me, and, I just tried to focus on the situation that he was with me. And it was kind of hard, but I was trying to not focus on the problem. So if we kind of focus that Christ is with us, instead of the storm itself. You can feel his presence. You can feel him with you. So my last day of chemo, my sister in Texas, she had ordered this and mailed it to get here just in time for my last day of chemo. And it's a signed print by a wonderful artist, and it shows Christ in the boat. Jesus was his disciples. And he's calming the water. And but I just think this is also a message of hope that when you go through the storms of your life, try not to think of the storms, just know that the storms will pass. Eventually they will pass. And the whys, we can't answer the whys. You know, Bob Bondurant once told me we can never answer whys. That's something through mankind that's never been answered until we leave this earth. And then this year at my reunion, I was mentioning that because I always thought that we'll never know the answers to the whys till we leave this earth. And they looked at me and they said, you know what, by then it's not going to make any difference anyway. You don't need to know what the answers are. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So we just have to, put our trust and faith in Christ and know that he will get us through all the storms of life. And that's all.